What if I told you that the latest season of Doctor Who might just be the best storyline that the show has ever done? Now, this is not a popular hot take right now, but what if I said that I have a theory that could fix nearly every problem that people have with this season? What if I said that more thought, more care, and more planning has been put into this run than anyone has been giving it credit for? And I have the evidence to back that up. I think I've figured out the real story that this show is telling. A story hidden just beneath the surface. A story that isn't over yet. But let's rewind. It's 2023. David Tennant is the 14th Doctor, and Donna Noble has just spilled a cup of coffee on the TARDIS. The TARDIS goes haywire, breathes fire, plays a war song, and then the TARDIS disappears. She wanders off on her own for the next 40 minutes, leaving the Doctor and Donna to face their distorted funhouse mirrors. And remember that term, mirror. Mirrors are going to be huge here. Anyway, when the TARDIS finally gets back, things are weird. Because elements of fairy tales have suddenly entered the universe. The Doctor attributes all this to the fact that he poured salt at the edge of the universe. But what if the Doctor is wrong? What if something else is going on here? The TARDIS disappears. The world becomes fairy tale themed. I think these two things are connected. And I think there's a smoking gun that proves it. It's Space Babies. It's beloved episode of television, Doctor Who Space Babies. But first, let's talk about mirrors. Mirroring is a storytelling technique that Doctor Who has made regular use of ever since the show's revival in 2005. The technique comes in two main forms: situational mirroring and character mirroring. In a situational mirror, the characters encounter a scenario that either reflects something that's already happened to them or foreshadows something that will happen to them. An example of the former is the Parting of the Ways, where the Doctor faces the choice of either destroying the Daleks at the cost of killing everyone on Earth, or doing nothing and allowing the Daleks to destroy the universe. This mirrors the choice that the Doctor faced during the Time War of whether or not to destroy Gallifrey.
Coward. Any day.
An example of a situational mirror as foreshadowing is the Snowmen. When the Doctor first encounters Clara Oswin Oswald, he tries to erase her memories and make her forget that she ever met him. This foreshadows the Doctor's final encounter with Clara, which hinges on him trying to erase her memories, only for Clara to turn the tables and make him forget her instead. The other side of this technique is character mirroring, where parallels are drawn between two characters in order to implicitly reveal something about each of them. For example, in Series 9, Clara and Missy are set up as mirrors of one another. The implication is that if we look at Clara, we can catch a glimpse of what the Master was like when they were young, and what their relationship with the Doctor was like when it was good. And if we look at Missy, we can catch a glimpse of the path that Clara might go down if she and the Doctor keep falling into ever greater obsession and codependence. What I'm arguing here is that Space Babies is a situational mirror that foreshadows something that hasn't been revealed to us yet.
It's like a story. The teaching software told a story.
It invented the bogeyman.
For the baby.
Space babies.
Oh, the machine is literal, like a computer. It literally said, babies need fiction, they need stories, they need monsters.
Yeah.
Because the plot of Space Babies is that this machine has decided that babies need stories, and it wants to help these babies in this very literal, machine-minded way, so it is going to bring stories to life. It's going to make them a fairy tale, it's going to make them a boogeyman. And I think that this is foreshadowing. I think that this is a microcosm of the entire story that's to follow. I think that the TARDIS has decided that the Doctor needs stories, so she's going to turn the entire universe into a fairy tale for the Doctor.
You were right, you know. The universe generally fails to be a fairy tale. But that's where we come in.
Once upon a time, late on Christmas Eve, a stranger came to the church on Ruby Road.
She's going to give him this fairy tale orphan companion so the Doctor can process his own adoption trauma.
I'm adopted.
Oh,
Yeah, I only found out recently. That's a coincidence.
Oh, don't be saying that.
She's going to construct a mystery around this companion because the Doctor loves mysteries, and she's going to hide clues that would let them solve that mystery too early. And the TARDIS is going to create these fairy tale bad guys, because if babies need boogeymen, then the Doctor needs bad guys.
What have you done?
I looked into the TARDIS, and the TARDIS looked into me. I am the bad wolf. I create myself.
The bad wolf, the big bad wolf, the fairy tale villain come to life.
Everything must come to dust. All things. Everything dies.
I bring Sutek's dust of death.
Do you get it? Do you get it? There's nobody else here. You are fighting your own hardware and it's killing you. I mean, most armies would notice that they were fighting smoke and shadows, but not this lot, Ruby.
It may seem like a paradox to say that it's comforting for the Doctor to encounter someone like Sutek, but when you meet someone who's this completely uncomplicated black and white avatar of all things evil, then that's actually a comforting thought. Because then you get to say, you're bad, so I must be good. You're wrong, so I must be right. You're the evil one, so I don't need to work on myself.
Because if you're dead, then I must represent life. Surely that's what I am. Life.
In other words, we are in the Doctor's wish world. We have been in the Doctor's wish world ever since the coffee got spilled on the TARDIS. Now, does this mean the Doctor is controlling the world? Not exactly. The Doctor and the TARDIS have a psychic connection, and the TARDIS is looking into his mind in order to produce a story that meets his narrative expectations. What this means is that we're not always getting what the Doctor wants to see. We're getting what he expects to see. This is demonstrated in 73 Yards, where the Doctor disappears and Ruby is temporarily granted control of the Wish World, aka the TARDIS perception filter, with its range of exactly 73 yards. Ruby believes, on some deep level, that her birth mother abandoned her because there was something wrong with her. If everyone learned that terrible truth, that thing that's wrong with her, then they'd abandon her too. So Ruby makes this belief come to life. She makes this story about herself real. And who is the woman? What is this force that's been making everyone abandon her? It's Ruby. It's an older Ruby. It's a mirror. To sum things up so far, we're in the Doctor's wish world. That's what Season 1 is. It's this psychodrama. It's the Doctor working through his own issues in this narrativized form, and that narrative has taken over the entire world around him without him even noticing it. But somebody's noticed it, because guess who's not the last of the Time Lords? This guy.
And that's how the story of the church on Ruby Road comes to an end. With a very happy ending for little Ruby Sunday.
So the Rani disguises herself as Ruby's neighbor, and she starts stalking the Doctor around the universe, trying to figure out how his wish world works. And the Rani sees the potential here. She sees that the Doctor's TARDIS has been warping reality on this massive scale, and he doesn't even realize he's doing it. So she says, what if someone did do that on purpose?
Don't you ever wonder deep down in both your hearts where your TARDIS is?
This is why the Rani hatches this whole plan that revolves around luring the Doctor to a specific point in time and space so she can steal his TARDIS and make it the center of her spooky scary bone palace. But the Rani isn't the only one trying to use the Doctor's delusions to her advantage, because guess who's not the second to last of the Time Lords? Enter the Master. Or should I say, the Dungeon Master?
Ah! Did you get your name from Dungeons and Dragons?
Roll for insight.
He's the bad guy. Da, do, 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 do. So the Master notices that the Doctor has reality warped the whole universe into a fanfiction, and he decides to self-insert himself into that fanfiction. He shows up in cosplay as his femme fatale bounty hunter OC, so he can seduce the Doctor and trick him into wearing this ring. We'll get back to that. Meanwhile, the Doctor continues on to the big season finale, where he faces off against the TARDIS's Fursona. The Doctor gets his big cathartic win, and the mystery of Ruby's mom is wrapped up in this strange and logically inconsistent way. Because there is no mystery. There was never a mystery. The TARDIS has been hiding this regular human nurse on purpose to make the Doctor's adventure more fun. But before we move on from Empire of Death, let's talk about Spoon Woman. Because there's clearly something really important about Spoon Woman. The whole episode summary on Disney Plus is about her. But why? I think the significance of Spoon Woman is that she's a mirror. She's the last of several mirrors in Season 1. Because the Doctor and Ruby have kept encountering stories about parents and children and foundlings and abandonment and loss. This is what the Doctor describes as connecting like crazy.
What is it with you and baby?
I was going to say the same thing to you.
Gone from baby to baby. I'm not saying things are connected, and yet things connect.
If things connect, then you are connecting like crazy.
And he attributes the connecting to Ruby, just like he attributes the snow to her. But it's not happening because of Ruby. It's happening because of the Doctor. The Doctor is thinking about his own adoption. He's thinking about how he abandoned Susan. And he is manifesting these stories that reflect that. So Spoon Woman is the last and the most important of these Season 1 Doctor mirrors. Because Spoon Woman says this.
Are you okay?
I think my daughter died, didn't she? And I forgot.
I think she did. I'm sorry.
I think my daughter died and I forgot. I think that this is the Doctor's main motive for creating the Wish World and for repressing the fact that he's created this Wish World. The Doctor's daughter died and he wants to forget. There are some significant shifts between Seasons 1 and 2. The first and most obvious is our change in companions. Ruby was the Doctor's ideal companion in the sense that she's this starry-eyed 19-year-old who immediately trusts the Doctor, who sees this 1,000-year-old alien as her peer and bestie, and who is able to inspire the Doctor to be his best self without ever meaningfully challenging the Doctor. And then we get Belinda, who is a 30-something with a career who knows a power imbalance when she sees one. She knows what a coercive relationship feels like. She is immediately suspicious of the Doctor and his whole persona. And with this shift in companions comes a shift in tone. If Season 1 was a fairy tale, it was the classic Disney-fied fairy tale, in, both senses. But Season 2 is pulling from the Brothers Grimm, very directly by the finale. This is dark fantasy, this is fantasy horror. And thanks to that tone shift, Ruby gets to only see the Doctor in the most flattering light. But Belinda is immediately presented with warning signs that the Doctor is dangerous. What this means is that Ruby fits seamlessly into the Doctor's narrative, but if Belinda is going to fit into that narrative, she'll have to be molded into it. She will need to be rewritten into the kind of character that the Doctor wants and expects.
Isn't it funny? I used to say, take me home.
Mm-hmm. And now you want to stay. I knew it. I knew I would get you in the end.
But aside from the companions, aside from the tone, there is another hugely important difference between Season 1 and Season 2. The mirrors have changed. And it starts with Alan. Alan is Belinda's toxic high school ex-boyfriend. He's a gamer.
You mean it's like a game? With robots and cities and lasers. And you're saying this is mine? I can make up the rules and win. Give it to me.
He relates to the whole world as a game, he declares himself dictator king of a planet, he disintegrates a bunch of people for funsies, he undergoes an off-brand version of cyberconversion, which leaves him feeling stronger than ever, but also secretly in a lot of pain. And Alan shows up in disguise to try to get Belinda to marry him. Now, who is Alan a mirror of? Is he a Dr. Mirror? Well, I mean, a little bit. There are some parallels being drawn here between Belinda's coercive relationship with Alan and the dynamic forming between her and the Doctor. But there is someone standing in front of this mirror who is much more obvious. Alan is a master mirror. The master is a gamer.
How about that? I win.
They are obsessed with winning. They relate to other people as toys or balloons to be popped. Most recently, they named themselves after Dungeons and Dragons. The Master is the Doctor's toxic high school ex. The Master is closely related with cyberconversion and the whole concept of robotic undeath. And the Master just showed up in disguise trying to get the Doctor to marry him. But see, the thing about this storyline is that the mirrors are diegetic.
I thought that was not diegetic.
What I mean by that is that right now, the mirrors are not just a storytelling device. It's not just an in-universe coincidence that the Doctor keeps encountering all these reflections. There is a plot reason that this is happening. The TARDIS is manifesting a hall of mirrors that all reflect the Doctor's psyche. So what does it mean if the mirrors have started reflecting the Master's psyche? I think it means that the Master's mind has entered this wish world. He has found a way to influence the perception filter. Probably when Rogue gave the Doctor that ring. Season 2 keeps very prominently showing us that the Doctor is still wearing it. The ring has become our Chekhov's gun. And our best guess right now for how that Chekhov's gun is going to be fired is that the ring is psychic. The Master is using that ring to channel some of his own thoughts into the TARDIS, where they get all mixed up with the Doctor's thoughts to form the TARDIS's Rorschach test of a fairy tale. The Doctor and the Master are now co-authors of this story, and the Master is trying to steer this narrative in a very specific direction. What direction? We can find out by looking at the mirrors. Because it doesn't stop with Alan. Every episode of Season 2 holds up a very prominent mirror of the Master. And if we look into these mirrors, then that is our window into the Master's psyche. This is how we figure out what the Master is doing and why. So, we are going to go through episode by episode, and we are going to break down our mirrors. Episode 1. Like I said, our Master Mirror is Alan/the AI generator. But a key thing to note here is that every Master Mirror in Season 2 is a doubled mirror. Either it's two personas of the same person, like Alan and the AI generator, or two characters who are literally different people, but symbolically kind of the same person. Typically, half the mirror is the more obviously sympathetic or humanized side, and the other half is the more seemingly inhuman and monstrous side. But as we'll see, this story is interested in complicating those easy divisions. Episode 2. Our mirrors are Lux as Ring-a-Ding, and Lux as Helen Pye, because the Master is both a funny cartoon who eats people and the Doctor's dead wife. Reginald Pye is our Doctor Mirror in this scenario. He can't stop feeding the beast because he can't let go of his lost love. Reginald is literally a projectionist, just like how the Doctor is projecting his own issues onto the rest of the world. Also, let's take a note of the connections being drawn between Lux and the TARDIS. Lux was brought here by moonlight, and the TARDIS set has been very carefully framed so that one of the doorways looks like a crescent moon. And then Lux almost name-drops the big bad wolf.
Let me in! Let me in! By the hair of my chinny chin chin! Or is that a different cartoon?
Lux is trapped inside the theater. As Ring-a-Ding, his goal is to escape the theater by stealing the Doctor's regeneration energy and using it to create a new body. But as Helen Pye, Lux seems to have a different goal. Or, as the mirrors of us, the audience, put it,
Well, I really, really loved it. Though I'd mark it down to a 7 out of 10 because it gave away the ending in the middle. And the villain's motivation changed.
And technically...
When they talk about the villain's motive changing, this seems to be pointing to the fact that Lux's Ring-a-Ding wants to escape in the traditional sense, but Lux's Helen wants to escape through death, or at least a oneness with the universe that amounts to death. Her plan is to encourage Reginald to destroy the wall, the fourth wall, you might say, between the theater and the outside world. She hands him a match so that the two of them can burn together, and she says,
Find me.
Find me.
Helen says, find me, like Rogue. She dances with the Doctor Mirror like Rogue. Her hair is even styled like Rogue's. Helen isn't just a Master Mirror, she is very specifically a Rogue Mirror. Let's make a big mental note of that, and let's also put a pin in that thing about giving away the ending halfway through. Episode 3, Alice and the Midnight Entity. At the start of the episode, we're presented with a dichotomy that the Doctor then challenges.
Could be surviving, or could be the killer.
It could be both.
However, it turns out that the Doctor is just as tempted by that dichotomy as anyone else. He wants to be able to split the person he's dealing with into Alice, the purely sympathetic victim, and the Midnight Entity, the purely evil monster that he can perform an exorcism on and destroy, leaving Alice unharmed. But it doesn't work like that. On a literal level, I think the implication is that Alice and the Entity have formed some kind of symbiosis. On a symbolic level, the Midnight Entity is, and always has been, a mirror.
They broke all the mirrors. Every single room, there's no mirrors.
It reflects whoever looks into it. It whispers back to you your most repressed thoughts, your darkest impulses. It's the shadow self.
What if the thing behind you is you?
And this version of the Midnight Entity is Alice's shadow. It's her refusal to let people turn their back on her, her refusal to be subjected to ableist violence, her refusal to be told that she's too diseased to be allowed back into society.
Then take me with you, Lord President.
You are diseased.
And these aren't purely negative impulses. This is self-preservation instinct. Alice is a victim, she is acting in self-defense, but she's also made this choice that's morally fraught at best, which is to kill as many people as she has to get home, and to expose as many people to contamination as she has to if she wants to see her daughter again. I think this is all a reflection of the way that the Doctor relates to the Master. He wants to believe that if he can just exorcise the madness, or the drums, or the addiction to being bad, then the innocent friend he remembers will be waiting underneath. But it doesn't work like that. The Master is a whole person, their monster and victim, killer and survivor. And I think the ableism that Alice faces is also drawing a connection with the New Who Master, and the way that they've consistently been portrayed as having some combination of mental illness, addiction, and chronic pain. And there's one more key aspect of this mirror, the daughter.
The doctor gave it to me when my daughter...
Again, we'll put a pin in that. Before we move on, let's just note the way that Shia functions as a Doctor mirror. We get a whole monologue about how she ran away from her homeworld to make the universe a better place, just like the Doctor did, and this happens right before she martyrs herself under the belief that she can take the Entity down with her and save everyone else. But this does not work. She was wrong about the rules of the game they were playing, and she was wrong to think that killing herself was the answer to the problem of the Shadow Self. Episode 4, Conrad and the Shriek. Conrad is the perfect new boyfriend that Ruby thought she could trust, but as it turns out, he's just using her in an elaborate undercover scheme. This is, of course, more rogue foreshadowing, but I think Conrad's role as conspiracy theorist and would-be WikiLeaks guy also ties him to Spy Master, who uncovered and leaked the big conspiracy about the Timeless Child. The way that Ruby views Conrad also seems to be telling us something about the Doctor and the Master. Even after Conrad's big betrayal, Ruby still doesn't believe that their relationship was completely a lie, and she still wants Conrad to be happy. She makes a wish for Conrad's happiness, which, effectively, strips away his memories of his old life, and rewrites him into a new character. This seems like another callback to Spy Master and the Timeless Child storyline. The implication there was that the Doctor might have tried to give himself and the Master a second chance by having them both memory wiped and turned back into babies. This episode is also the point where we can really start to see patterns forming between our mirrors. Conrad gets a right-wing radicalization narrative like Alan, but interestingly, he also gets an infection narrative like Alice. The Shriek is the embodiment of that infection. It's a dog locked in a vault, evoking both Missy in the vault and Saxon in the dog collar. And then the Shriek bites Conrad on the arm, calling back to the hospital patient Belinda was treating back in the first episode.
Who bit you? Was it a dog? Was it a man? Was it your wife?
Was it a dog? Was it a man? Was it your wife? So that's another thing to file away for our mental notes. Why have two of our master mirrors, the Midnight Entity and the Shriek, both been embodiments of infection? Why do we keep coming back to the idea of exposing people to contamination and not taking an antidote? Episode 5, Omo and Ada Tokunbo. Hi, Merle. AKA the Barber lowercase and the Barber uppercase. Ada Tokunbo introduces himself as a god. He's not.
He's lying to you. He's lying.
He's not a god, but he has been wronged by the gods. They exploited him. They used him to gain power, and then they cast him aside. One of the gods was an abusive parent to his partner. So he decides to get revenge. He steals Omo's barbershop, and he turns it into a story engine, which will allow him to destroy the gods and become the new author of reality. The story engine seems like a pretty clear metaphor for the TARDIS, and the barbershop has to be stolen, just as taking control of the story engine requires stealing the Doctor's TARDIS. The gods represent the Time Lord High Council, the ones who gave the Master the drums, left him to deal with a lifetime of mental illness and chronic pain, and then threw him away like he was disposable. Abena is our Doctor Mirror here, with her abusive dad Anansi as a stand-in for Tectayun. Side note, but the implication that Ada Tokunbo used to work for Abena's dad has some really interesting implications for the Master and Tectayun, which I am not going to get into right now because we are already too deep into the weeds as it is. But let's also take note of the specific things that the Barber claims to be the god of: storytelling, theater, and mischief. Sound like a certain D&D fan we might know? But what about our lowercase Barber? How does Omo serve as the other half of our Master Mirror? Well, Omo is the Doctor's old friend. He was supposed to represent safety, home, community in a hostile world, but he betrays the Doctor's trust by calling for help. He's trapped and afraid, and he wants the Doctor's help, but in asking for it, he gets the Doctor trapped with him. More patterns are forming now between our mirrors. Lux and Omo are both trapped in a prison that they can't leave because the environment outside would kill them. All they have in their prison is stories. The movies that Lux watches, and the storytelling circle of barber patrons that Omo participates in. And then there's another pattern. Alan and Ada Tokunbo both lied about being gods. And another. Conrad and Ada Tokunbo both lied to their romantic partners, though in this case he was trying to get revenge on Abena's behalf.
I wanted something like the brain, flexible, strong, that could expand and make connections between ideas, cross-connecting concepts, culture, and ideas.
And this line seems like a description of the game of connections that this whole season is encouraging us to play. So let's add another one. The Doctor drops a reference to Hemingway's famous 6-word story: for sale, baby shoes, never worn. Ultimately, this episode comes down to a struggle between the Doctor and the Barber over the storytelling engine, the heart inside a brain.
Get away from my heart.
And when the Barber tries to go down with the ship, the Doctor pleads with him to go on living. Adetokunbo is granted a new name, a name people can trust, and he and Abena, our Dr. Mir, part on good terms. Episode 6, Kid and Win. Now, the barber and the barber being two halves of the same mirror was pretty straightforward. But you might already be asking yourself, if Kid and Win are symbolically the same person, then why did they make out? And that is a great question because Cora, Win, and Kid form our triangle of the Doctor, Missy, and Saxon.
Hold me.
Kiss me.
Make me.
Did you want to be alone?
Win is the one who has some qualms about the mission, and the one who still misses her childhood closeness with Cora. But she's not quite willing to switch sides over it. Kid is the one who wants to cast all moral quibbles and personal affections aside, to go all in on being the monster that the world has always seen him as. And Cora's forced assimilation mirrors the Doctor's forced assimilation into Time Lord culture, and their disconnectedness from their species and culture of origin. But there is another huge piece of situational mirroring going on here.
It's called a delta wave.
Because the weapon that Kid and Win are planning to use is the delta wave, and that is the exact same weapon that the Doctor was planning to use all the way back in the Parting of the Ways.
A delta wave!
What's a delta wave?
What we catch a glimpse of here is the fate that the Doctor nearly inflicted on the entire population of Earth. So the Doctor misses Kid's tragic backstory. He sides with the status quo over the survivor of a genocide, and he writes Kid off as a monster who just loves to kill. When the Doctor starts torturing Kid, this is the Doctor's anger with himself. It's his shame and revulsion at how close he came to using the delta wave. This is the uglier side of what the Doctor was getting out of his opposition with Sutekh. Because if the only way to believe that you're the good guy is to project everything you're ashamed of onto an external bad guy, then you end up casting other people as the monsters in your story. You lash out at people who don't deserve it. And that is what the Master represents for the Doctor.
It could only be done by someone brilliant.
And monstrous.
And ruthless.
Contemptible.
You. No, you.
The Master is the ultimate mirror, the ultimate shadow self. The Doctor defines themselves in opposition with the Master. The Master is everything that the Doctor is not. But is that the truth? Or is the real problem how much the Doctor and the Master are the same? Meanwhile, this is the episode where it becomes increasingly obvious that something is off with Belinda. This is not quite the same character we met in the Robot Revolution, and on some level, the Doctor knows that. This is also the episode where the Doctor starts making increasingly obvious wishes of his wish world, especially when it comes to his instrumentalization of Mike and Gary.
Now, if only I had an expert in triangulation. If only I had a hologram expert. Oh, if only I had medical staff. Only I had someone very clever to turn this VIP pod into a revival booth.
And speaking of Mike and Gary, what we have here is an old married couple whose relationship is just a little on the rocks. One is an engineer who loves a big song and dance spectacle, and the other is a doctor. Who could these two be mirrors of? But then we get distracted from all that, because even though it's never the Ronnie, it's finally the Ronnie. By the finale, the two Ronnies have taken over the role of our Master Mirrors, and it seems like the Ronnie is kind of doing it on purpose. She has cast herself into the role that the Master played back in his big reintroduction in the Sound of Drums arc. She's the other last of the Time Lords, the old friend from high school, the ambiguous ex-lover.
People said we were lovers. Can you remember if that's true?
Side note, but I think the only reason to phrase it like that is to imply that it's not true, which could mean that the Ronnie was the Doctor's high school beard to cover up his relationship with the Master. But let's zoom out for a second. Let's pause our examination of the Master Mirrors and let's take a look at the big picture of what the Ronnie's actual plan is here. Because all this makes way more sense through the lens that up to now we've been in the Doctor's wish world. Why does the Ronnie's plan revolve so heavily around what the Doctor believes? Because the Doctor is the one with the psychic connection with the TARDIS. Why does the Rani need a Pantheon member? Because the TARDIS created the Pantheon, and she's so machine literal about this whole fairy tale conceit that now she's produced a seventh son of a seventh son in 1800s Bavaria. Why does the Rani put Conrad in charge of the Wish World? Because she needs to break the Doctor's suspension of disbelief, and the Doctor was never going to question his own Wish World. That's reality exactly as he expects it to be. So the Rani has Conrad rewrite the Wish World into the antithesis of the Doctor's values, a reality the Doctor can't help but question. And this Wish World is also a metaphor for the repressive society on Gallifrey, the one the Doctor first assimilated into and then ran away from. We get some really fascinating insights into the Time Lords here, and one of the biggest ones is that the Time Lords are eugenicists. The Rani wants to genetically engineer the Time Lords back from extinction, but she rejects Poppy, the miracle half-Time Lord baby, because the Rani sees species mixing as a form of contamination. She wants a quote-unquote pure, untainted version of her Ubermenschen. And for that, she needs Omega. But to get at Omega, she needs to make the Doctor doubt so hard that it breaks reality. And so, we get Rogue's Zoom call from Superhell.
But the mysterious Time Lady was clever and wise, and she knew that Doctor Who was weak. Doctor.
Once again, this is a sequence that only really makes sense if we understand that Rogue is the Master, and the Master and the Rani are working together. The Doctor needs to doubt, the Rani knows that the Doctor doubts more after dark, and so Rogue shows up in a badly green-screened version of Hell. His outfit is immaculate. His hair is artfully mussed. He has inexplicable knowledge of exactly what's been going on in the outside world, with the tables. His acting is sus as, well, it's sus as hell.
And this hell dimension is sliding into the pit. I don't know if I'm gonna survive. Thank you for that, you know?
And if all that's not obvious enough, we get this helpful little musical sting.
He's right, that is not what tables are supposed to do.
Who's it?
That's the Master's theme. That's the 4-beat drums. Da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. I think it's a safe bet that the Rani is the one who picked up the Master's tooth. She's got Rogue using his feminine wiles to help her reach Omega. But we already know that the Master has goals of his own. And he knows something that he hasn't told the Rani. He knows the great irony of the Time Lords. There's no such thing as a quote-unquote uncontaminated Time Lord. They're all hybridized with timeless child DNA. So why is Rogue still letting her chase Omega? Let me pause here and give a quick summary of what Omega's whole deal is in Classic Who. Now you might ask, is this relevant? And the answer is yes, very. Omega is supposed to be this ancient Time Lord who discovered the solar energy source that allowed the Time Lords to invent time travel. But during that big expedition, he went missing. By the Doctor's time, Omega has become this mythologized cultural hero. And then we learn that Omega actually got stuck in something called the antimatter universe. Normally, nothing made of matter can exist there, but Omega has clung to survival by creating what's basically a psychic dream bubble. Anything he imagines in there comes to life. Props, scenery, goblin wrestling dream ballets, you know, the usual stuff. If this sounds familiar, then yes, this is basically the same concept as a Wish World. Anyway, Omega is now stuck in a catch-22. To escape the antimatter world, he'd have to let go of his dream bubble. But if he stops willing the dream bubble into existence for even a second, the antimatter will destroy him. So Omega's plan is to get the Doctor trapped in the antimatter world with him. That way, the Doctor can take over the dream bubble. He can be the new Atlas holding the world on his shoulders, while Omega escapes. But then it turns out that Omega has been in the antimatter world for so long that it has eaten away his physical body. He only exists as a being of pure thought, pure imagination.
Come with me and you'll be in a world of pure imagination.
Omega takes this well. So Omega settles on Plan B. He'll keep the Doctor trapped with him in the antimatter world, and that way he'll have someone to talk to and keep him company. But the Doctor escapes and seemingly destroys the antimatter world and Omega. Except he didn't, because Omega comes back. This time, Omega's cool new plan is to copy the Doctor's DNA so he can 3D print a new body based on the Doctor's. The Time Lords have a super fair and proportionate reaction to this, which is to immediately sentence the Doctor to death. So Omega can't have his body.
I need the Doctor's body.
Long story short, the Doctor fakes his death and escapes. Omega successfully clones the Doctor, but then his doppelganger body becomes sick and starts falling apart. And in a stellar moment of pacifism, the Doctor shoots Omega on the Time Lord's orders. Even though Omega was already dying, and even though the Time Lords were trying to have the Doctor killed 5 minutes ago. So I am tacking this on at the end here, but I just want to highlight this one brief scene from the episode that stuck with me because it was so odd and so oddly moving. Omega has stolen the Doctor's face, but instead of doing anything evil with it, he stops to watch some kind of pipe organ puppet show. He makes eye contact with a child in the crowd, and Omega smiles at him. A little strangely, like he hasn't done it in a few million years, but you get the sense in this moment that maybe there was no evil plan, or maybe it's been forgotten. Maybe Omega was really just after connection. Anyway, that brings us to the present day, and the point of me summarizing all that is that Omega fits perfectly into all the themes we've been talking about. He's the mirror, the doppelganger, the shadow self. His name was originally supposed to be Om, as in who upside down. He has his own wish world, for God's sake. So why, then, does our little Omega cameo do nothing with any of that? Well, for starters, we're still in the Doctor's wish world. The Rani thought she could use the Doctor's wish world against him, but as soon as Ruby gets a hold of the Wish Baby and the TARDIS goes right back to handing the Doctor an impossibly perfect fairy tale ending.
If only I had a weapon.
That confrontation with Omega is stupidly anticlimactic because it's supposed to be. But another thing? I don't think that guy is actually Omega. Because if we look at the subtitles, this creature is actually described as the Beast of Omega. It's related to Omega, but it's not Omega. The real Omega is still in the Underverse. The Rani has gotten dragged there with him, and in case we've forgotten, the Dungeon Master still has some kind of master plan of his own. And this is where all of our mirrors finally come together. Because if we look at our master mirrors, and if we look at their patterns, I think we can map out a hypothesis of what the master is doing and why. A grand unified theory of the master. And it all comes back to Omega. Or should I say, Omega?
Oh! That's my name, and that is why I chose it.
Deep within the Underverse, he is hidden. The one who is lost.
Because here's my theory. Just as the Doctor missed Kid's tragic backstory, I think the Doctor has been missing crucial context about the Master. And one of those biggest pieces of context is that Spy Master was telling a huge lie of omission about what happened to Gallifrey.
When I said someone did that, obviously I meant I did.
Because if we piece together the themes of our mirrors, we get infection, contamination, an antidote refused, a revenge plot against the gods, and Time Lord eugenics. And a picture starts to emerge. See, between the end of time and her regeneration into Missy, there was a period where the Master was back home on Gallifrey. During this period, the Master was apparently cured off-screen of his drums. Or at least that's what the Doctor assumes. But the Master would have just found out that the High Council intentionally put the drums in his head when he was just a child. And I think the Master would have been out for revenge. I think he decided to infect the High Council with his drums. He found a way to transfer the drums from his head into theirs as a karmic punishment. And around the same time, I think he also hacked into the Matrix and WikiLeaked the Timeless Child files. Note that while Spymaster gives the Doctor the impression that he did that in his current regeneration, there's no reason it couldn't have happened earlier. And I think some of Missy's references to her and the Doctor's past might imply that Saxon was actually the one who found those files.
Since he was a little girl.
But I think these two actions had unintended consequences, because the Time Lord High Council, rulers of a eugenicist society, had just found out that every Time Lord alive had quote-unquote contaminated DNA. And they'd also just been given the drums that make you want to kill people. So in a nutshell, I think the High Council panicked and hit the big red genocide button. And then Spymaster came back home and found all the Time Lords dead. And I think he felt responsible, which to some extent he was, but I think the Master fell into such a state of despair that he decided to lead the Doctor to believe that he'd killed the Time Lords. Personally, single-handedly, on purpose. And that way, the Doctor would have no choice but to kill the Master.
I thought if he was compressed, the death particle would activate. All this would be over. I would have been okay with that.
Anyway, that plan all kind of fell apart into Rasputin dancing and failed body snatching, and then Spymaster encountered the Toymaker. And when he lost to the Toymaker, I think he bigenerated. Because if the Doctor bigenerated and the Ronnie bigenerated, then that is a Chekhov's gun of its own. That still has to go off. And that would also explain why all our Master mirrors were doubled mirrors. I think the Master bigenerated into Spymaster and Rogue. Rogue was the one who got turned into a tooth and then picked up by the Ronnie, and Spymaster escaped, except he was still stuck in the Toymaker's domain, aka the Underverse, aka the antimatter world. And it was at this point that I think the Master, the cosplayer, the guy who loves disguises, the guy whose mirrors keep pretending to be gods, decided to dress up as fairy tale hero Omega. I think the Omega we met in Classic Who was the Master the entire time. Why was Omega so obsessed with the Doctor specifically? Someone he, in theory, should have never met before? Why was he a fan of funny little puppet shows? Why was Omega such a diva? Why was he serving? Because he's the Master. And come on, I mean, this is the show where we have Mrs. Flood as the Ronnie, because if you mix up Ronnie, you get Rain, and Flood, Rain, Flood. We just did It's Not AI, It's Al. You think they're gonna do It's Not AI, It's Al, but they're not gonna do Omega? And once again, this makes Omega the Mr. Ring-a-Ding to Rogue's Helen Pie. They gave away the ending halfway through. Omega Master is trapped in another world, and he no longer has a body. He needs to steal the Doctor's body.
I need the Doctor's body.
But how can he influence anything from the Underverse? Because he's got a guy on the outside, his bigeneration, Rogue. Rogue can manipulate the Ronnie, he can use his ring to psychically steer the course of the Doctor's narrative, and he can push them both in the direction of Omega. But if Rogue is Helen Pie, then their goals aren't perfectly aligned. Rogue wants the Doctor to blow up the Underverse, killing Omega and then himself. Rogue needs to hand the Doctor a match. So our question becomes, what is the match? Because at the end of Reality War, the Doctor does burn himself up like Reginald Pye. He intentionally kickstarts a regeneration and burns his body up as fuel to save Poppy. Poppy is our match. Poppy, the miracle baby, made of hopes and dreams and wishes. The Doctor insists that she's real. The Ronnie insists that she's not. But neither of them quite seems to know where Poppy came from. Poppies are the flowers of remembrance. Poppy is a manifestation of the Doctor's repressed memories of his daughter, who died and he forgot. The Doctor is willing to do anything to hang on to Poppy. He'd die for her. He'd risk the universe for her. He'd rewrite Belinda into a shell of herself. And why would Rogue choose that particular match? Because the Doctor's daughter who died and he forgot was also the Master's daughter.
The doctor gave it to me when my daughter...
The Doctor and the Master had a daughter together. Their daughter died. The Doctor tried to escape that grief by erasing both their own and the Master's memories. That's why they forgot their timeless children lifetimes. But now the Master remembers, and the Master is a fan of karmic revenge. The Doctor stole the Master's memories of his daughter, so now the Master is going to destroy the Doctor with the memory of their daughter. This is what the ring was always for. This is where the Master was steering the story. The Master used the Wish World to generate Poppy, the baby who might not be real, so the Doctor would burn himself alive and go to hell, aka the Underverse, where Omega is. This is the Master Plan. So, everybody still with me here? Yes? No? Maybe? Okay, even if you think I haven't just gone completely off the deep end, I bet you have at least one big question. Isn't this story already over? The season ended. The Doctor regenerated. The end? This story is supposed to be over, but we know it's not. Too many things are still unresolved. Ruby and Belinda are still trapped in a story of someone else's making.
Is the world exactly as it was?
Well, funny you should say. There are tiny little changes. Like Conrad's world was sort of glitchy. Now we've got the same.
And the colour teal is a bit more blue.
Ruby knows something is wrong, but she's being gaslit about it. And Belinda, who saw right away that the Doctor was dangerous, has had her entire sense of self so fundamentally rewritten that she can no longer recognize the danger.
Take her home, Doctor. Then take me to the stars.
That is a date.
Belinda! Where shall we go?
There's a great big universe waiting for us. Take me to the stars.
Good.
The Doctor has regenerated, but not into the next Doctor. He regenerated into the Bad Wolf. This is just about the biggest hint we could possibly get that this entire theory is right. The TARDIS has been the author of this story all along, and now she has fully taken over as the face of this story. The TARDIS has been mirroring the Doctor, his psyche, his fantasies, his hopes and fears, reflected onto the entire universe. And now, the TARDIS has achieved the ultimate act of mirroring. She has become Doctor Who. And just to make sure that we are absolutely crystal clear on what's happening here, the show has inserted into the regeneration scene this big flashy special effect, unmotivated by anything that's literally happening here. It's a special effect of a mirror shattering. But if that's the Bad Wolf, not the Doctor, then that means the real Doctor didn't regenerate. He went somewhere else. Like I said, I think 15 is in the Underverse, where he, the Ronnie, and Omega Master are about to have the high school reunion from hell. This is the culmination of all the mirrors. The Master is the Doctor's mirror. The Master is the shadow self. The Doctor has tried to repress his shadow, to convince himself that he is purely the good guy. But it doesn't work like that. That path leads to delusion, to harming other people without even being able to recognize your own capacity for harm. It leads to harming yourself. There's only one way for the Doctor to reckon with himself, to forgive himself, to move forward. The Doctor has to make peace with his shadow. And I may not be able to tell you exactly how or when this will all be resolved, but I believe that it will. Because there's one last thing we need to talk about. The 9th word. Remember how Space Babies kicked off Season 1 by giving us a microcosm of the bigger story? I think Robot Revolution has done the same thing with Season 2. The robots have a defect. The robots can't hear every 9th word. If the Resistance wants to communicate with each other without being overheard by their oppressors, they need to use a secret code. The first 8 words of every statement are fluff, distraction, filler. But the 9th word is true. When the Doctor initiates Belinda into the secret code, I think this is a metaphor for the show initiating us, the audience, into the secret code that we'll need to understand in order to read this story. A code of subtext and symbolism and mirrors.
Gotcha.
I am very grateful for your infinite wisdom.
But more than that, every ninth word is the truth. Season 2 had 8 episodes. What if the story isn't over yet because we're still waiting on the 9th word? The 9th episode? My best guess is that at some point between now and Season 3, we are in for one more Doctor Who special. A special that will follow the 15th Doctor into the Underverse, and maybe even follow him back out again. And the TARDIS, the Bad Wolf, our fairy tale author, can look directly into the camera, and she can tell us how this story really ends.
Oh, hello.